The oversight hearing by the Subcommittee on Fisheries, Wildlife, and Oceans will now come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on ocean policy priorities in the United States and the recommendations of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. Before recognizing the witnesses, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to my boss, the overall chairman of the Resources Committee, the Honorable Nick Rahal, and of course the former chairman of this subcommittee, Mr. Wayne Gilchrist. It's very nice to have both of you. And Mr. Sam Farr, longtime friend of mine, who's also with us. Thank you very much. Okay. Under Committee Rule 4G, the chairman and the ranking minority member can make opening statements, and I will also recognize our chairman and ranking member of the full committee who are with us this morning, as I just did. If any other members have statements, they can be included in the hearing record under unanimous consent. I ask unanimous consent that Representatives Farr and Allen have permission to sit on the dais and participate in the hearing. Without objection, I so order. This morning's hearings will focus on priorities for ocean policy reform in the United States and the recommendations of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. This collaborative effort merges the findings of two separate national commissions that make a broad range of ocean policy recommendations to Congress and other government entities in 2003 and 2004. The importance of these recommendations cannot be overstated. As the very first page of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy's report illustrates, the United States is an ocean nation. Our exclusive economic zone, which extends 200 miles out from our coasts, is the largest in the world, spanning over 13,000 miles of coastline and containing 3.4 million square nautical miles of ocean. My own district, the territory of Guam, has more than 60,000 square nautical miles of ocean. And as an island community, the oceans are a critical aspect of everyday life. I first became more acutely aware of the many challenges that we face in sustaining our ocean environment when I attended the Year of the Ocean Conference in Monterey, California in 1998. That watershed meeting laid the groundwork for the legislation passed by Congress to establish the U.S. Ocean Commission chaired by Admiral Watkins. That commission, along with the Pew Oceans Commission, worked tirelessly to explore the full breadth of threats our oceans face and to develop a framework for moving forward in addressing these threats. Now, it is incumbent upon us as policymakers to move forward in the implementation of these recommendations. According to the National Ocean Economics Program, our ocean economy generated $138 billion and 2.3 million jobs in 2004. It is up to us to provide the leadership needed to ensure the sustainability of our ocean ecosystems and all that they provide for us in the long term. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on the committee in the Ocean Caucus to provide that leadership. The chairwoman, since the ranking member, Congressman Brown, has been delayed, he will be here later. I'd like at this time to recognize Mr. Wayne Gilchrist.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the witnesses here this morning for their testimony and also for their extraordinary dedication to this issue, which is fundamental to present and unseen future generations to come, life on the planet, and attention that they have paid, that all of you have paid in an extraordinary manner to the oceans. Sam Farr has worked for a number of years now on a bill called Oceans 21, which is the essence of the Pew Ocean report by Leon Panetta and the Ocean Commission report by Admiral Watkins. And both of you have collaborated to produce what we think will be the fundamental design for ocean policy for generations to come. Your report has laid out before the nation and the world what the book Silent Spring did in the early 1960s. And we're at the very early stages of understanding the full ramifications of human activity on the planet and its degradation of nature's design. And so your blueprint, the collaboration of your two organizations, will lay out the kind of legislation that will carry us probably through the rest of this century. And so we will work very hard on this side and with the Senate side and with the administration to get this kind of legislation passed. And it deals with fundamental things like NOAA Organic Act, sanctuaries, which are so critical to habitat and to sustaining our fisheries, coral reefs that are under assault from things as primitive as hand grenades to fishing hooks to the acidification of the oceans because of climate change. Ocean governance is pretty fundamental. Fisheries issues, ocean research, mapping, all of these things and more you have laid out before us. We have a strong sense of appreciation for your dedication, and we'll work hard to make this thing becomes a reality in this particular Congress. And I also want to make one other comment about your effort to make us, the scientific community, and the public at large aware that climate change is just not something that happens in the atmosphere. It is just not something that melts the polar ice cap, the greenhouse ice cap in the West Antarctic. It is something that has a fundamental effect on the ocean chemistry, and if we're not careful, and if we're not bold, the chemistry of the ocean can become as primitive as it was millions of years ago. So to all of you, I want to give a hearty thanks, and unfortunately, like most members, I have another hearing and some other things to do, and I wanted to come down and make those comments on your behalf. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I wish to thank the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Gilchrist, and now I'd like to recognize the distinguished chair of the Resources Committee, Mr. Ray Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate the opportunity as chair of the Natural Resources Committee to be here this morning and commend you for conducting these hearings on the findings of the Pew Ocean Commission and the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy. It's certainly a delight to see our former colleague and former Chief of Staff to the White House, Leon Panetta, back in his old stomping grounds, and to see Admiral Watkins, both of these individuals so dedicated, as the gentleman from Maryland has stated, and so committed to this issue and to doing what's right for our ocean policy in this Congress, and their expertise over such a long period of time on this issue. I do also want to commend Mary Glackin from NOAA for being with us and appreciate her dedication at NOAA as well, and looking forward to her testimony. The gentleman from California, Mr. Farr, once a member of this committee, and the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, now a member of this committee, have also been very instrumental and dedicated in their leadership on this issue, and I appreciate that as well. As each know, when I assumed the chair of the Natural Resources Committee in January, I pledged to work with you to review the recommendations of these two bipartisan commissions and to move forward with the legislative and policy changes needed to better protect and manage our oceans and their vast resources. And I remain committed to that pledge. I feel compelled to note, Madam Chair, that while these two reports were both released more than 3 years ago, this is the first hearing that the committee with jurisdiction over our ocean resources, our committee, has held to fully explore their findings. It is unfortunate that it has taken so long, but I do commend you, Madam Chair, for your quick action and leadership in this regard. And again, I thank Leon and Admiral Watkins for their continued leadership, as well as their continued strong advocacy on behalf of our oceans. Too often commissions are formed, much effort is put into developing recommendations, then they sit on a shelf and collect dust and don't even get dusted off. These two leaders have refused to let that happen. They have worked together to form the Joint Ocean Committee's initiative. They've signaled their commitment to achieving real change in our ocean management regime and I thank them. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ray Hall, and who is the chair of the Natural Resources Committee. I'd like to also recognize Mr. Frank Pallone, who's joined us this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'll be very brief, but I just wanted to express my thanks to you for holding this long overdue hearing. The Pew Commission and the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy both painted a pretty bleak picture of the state of our oceans, but unfortunately we didn't really do much with this information during the past two Congresses, and your focus on the Commission's recommendations is badly needed given how much our coasts and oceans are suffering. I want to thank Admiral Watkins and Mr. Panetta for being here today. I also should point out that two members of the U.S. Ocean Commission from my district, Paul Gaffney, who's now the president of Monmouth University, and Lillian Liberti, believe me, over the last few years, they did not ever let me rest and kept constantly pointing out that, you know, this Congress needed to address your recommendations. So I don't think they're here today, but I want you to know that they literally talk to me every week about the Commission. I would just say we have one simple message. We have a lot of work to do. Oceans and coasts are particularly valuable to my district along the Jersey Shore, and we can't continue to sit idly by knowing what's happening out there. But I know that under our new chairwoman's authority here that we will see action. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to welcome Congressman Patrick Kennedy, who has joined us. Thank you,
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. I know, Leon, that you're going to be up in my state of Rhode Island in just a couple of weeks presenting at URI, and we're looking forward to having you. I represent the ocean state, so obviously we've been very excited about the work of the Oceans Commission, the fact that you've been trying to bring together the multitude of various budgets here in government and how they ought to be more coordinated as they impact one another. And as a member of the committee that funds NOAA, you know, I've been very concerned about how we don't get enough support from the Agriculture Committee, for example, because they have a great stake in whether we're adequately funding you know, the funding of NOAA because of the work that we're doing on the weather program. And I also believe that we're not getting enough support from NASA for satellite launches and for the life sciences through NASA. We're spending way too much money on mission to planet Mars and reestablishing a station on the moon as opposed to the life sciences and mission to planet Earth. And yet those are resources that can be refocused on our own planet. And of course, you know, that is again impinges upon our own ability to understand our own planet. And on and on and on. We have to understand the interrelationship between all of our various agencies and budgets on one another and how they affect our coastal zone and our world. Particularly as it results to climate change and our national security, and the fact that in the next many years, we're going to see the impact of global warming and the fact that most of the world's population lives on the coastal zone, and if we do not get about protecting our natural resources, we jeopardize those delicate ecosystems, and that could really put our Earth in an unstable position and lead to further instability around the world. So what you're doing is more than meets the eye, and I appreciate the fact that you're here today to make that case again, as you always do so effectively. So I'm glad to be here, and I thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me a chance.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Kennedy. And Sam, would you like to say a few words too?
I just want to thank you, Madam Chair. We've been long waiting for this hearing. Admiral Watkins and Congressman Panetta and all of us on this team of trying to merge the recommendations of both reports have been introduced, as Mr. Gilchrist said, in H.R. 21. But I really want to thank you and Chairman Ray Hall, because I think that with this hearing and with your dedication to trying to move this legislation, we really will see the work long overdue. About 5 years ago, that all this stuff was recommended to the Congress, and I'd like to see us put it into law. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Farr. I would now like to recognize our witnesses and give particular recognition to the first two who have served their country in many important positions during their long and distinguished careers. Admiral James Watkins is the former chair of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy and currently serves as the co-chair of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. And the Honorable Leon Panetta is the former chair of the Pew Oceans Commission and also is the current co-chair of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. I'd like to welcome both of you. Thank you for your leadership on this important issue and for taking the time to be here today. It is unfortunate that it has taken this long for Congress to invite you to testify about the findings of your commissions, but we are very pleased to have you here now. And I also recognize our final witness, Ms. Mary Glackin, the Assistant Administrator for Program Planning and Integration at NOAA. Welcome, Ms. Glackin. The chairwoman now recognizes Admiral Watkins to testify for 10 minutes. And I would note for all witnesses that the timing lights on the table will indicate when your time has concluded, and we would appreciate your cooperation in complying with the limits that have been set. Be assured that your full written statement will be submitted for the hearing record. And now it is my distinct pleasure to recognize Admiral Watkins.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of this subcommittee. Mr. Panetta and I are pleased to appear before you today in our capacities as co-chairs of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. It was a collaborative effort that we felt we needed to set up just 2 years ago to make sure that we did everything possible to accelerate the outcome of our proposals to establish a new national ocean policy in accordance with Oceans Act 2000. We also appreciate the opportunity to discuss the two commission's recommendations and to share our thoughts about priorities for legislative action. Your letter of invitation references the Joint Commission initiative on From Sea to Shining Sea. It was transmitted to the Senate last June at the request of a bipartisan group of 10 of its members, and that report outlined our priorities for action in the 109th Congress, actions that were urgently needed to address the many pressing issues we are facing regarding our oceans. Most of the actions identified in that report remain relevant today. Thus, we request that a copy of the report be accepted as part of the public record for this hearing, along with our formal written statements.
Without objection.
Leon and I have decided to divide our speaking responsibilities this morning by having me put into context the current situation surrounding our oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes, by briefly reviewing the work of the two commissions, our collaboration, establishing the joint initiative, and the state of our oceans. Leon's remarks will focus on priority actions that we feel this committee and Congress must take in the near term to make progress addressing the multitude of challenges facing our oceans. The precedent for establishing a national ocean policy was set back in the mid-60s when Congress established the Stratton Commission. Their report, entitled Our Nation and the Sea, released in '69, was the most comprehensive look at our oceans and the needs and opportunities inherent in better management of the seas. 30 years later, there was a growing sense that our nation needed to revisit the issue. The result was establishment of the privately funded Pew Oceans Commissions in the year 2000 and enactment of the Oceans Act of 2000, which created the publicly funded U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy, which I chaired. The Pew Ocean Commission released its report in June of 2003, while the U.S. Commission delivered its report to Congress and the President in September 2004. The net result was two remarkably similar reports with over 240 combined recommendations supporting an ecosystem-based approach to managing our marine resources. Let me take a minute to briefly outline some of the key shared recommendations of the two commissions, details of which are in our written statement. We need a new governance regime, guided by principles of ecosystem-based management, to strengthen the capacity of the federal government to integrate resources of the multitude of agencies with ocean-related responsibilities and expertise. As I recall, there's some 8 to 9 funding agencies, and there's another half dozen policy agencies that are very much involved. We need to restore America's fisheries, a major focus area for both commissions, requiring a greater emphasis on the role of science in the decision-making process and much better cooperation among stakeholders. And thanks to the Congress, the reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Management Act was passed last year, a great step forward and one very important to both commissions. In fact, it was the longest and most difficult chapter to deal with in the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy. We need to preserve and protect our coastal waters. Non-point source pollution is a major problem, and strengthening the link between coastal and watershed management is essential if we are to respond to cumulative impacts assaulting marine ecosystems. And that gets back to the governance issue. This is why a governance regime change is absolutely mandatory. We must significantly enhance our commitment to ocean science and education, building on the National Ocean Science Plan released by the administration in January of this year. Finally, we've got to overcome the stagnation of funding that has crippled our capacity to modernize ocean science, management, and education. An investment of $3 to $4 billion over current levels is called for by the two commissions and includes a doubling of the research base from the rather paltry $650 million today to $1.3 billion tomorrow. It's a modest increase given the consequences if we allow the current rate of degradation to continue. Now that represents, by the way, that $650 million, all federal agencies doing basic research. It used to be about 7% of the research and development budget. Today it's only 3.5%. So we've allowed it to degrade, thinking because the Russian submarines went away, that the oceans were no longer important. We were doing the deep ocean research, and today the Navy is now, instead of being 40% of the research base in the oceans, is down around 15%. That has to change, and I've talked to the Navy about that, to their Research and Advisory Committee, saying don't lose control of the seas. To control the seas, you've got to understand the seas. To understand the seas, the Navy's got to stay in the game and be a leader in the research base. So let me take a minute to clarify why there's an urgent need for Congress to act. Here's the State of Our Oceans report that both commissions have come up with. Enormous human, environmental, and economic impacts associated with hurricanes and other increasingly intense coastal storms plagues us. Massive dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, Chesapeake Bay, and most recently off Oregon. Continued loss of coastal wetlands, which is the natural protection against the encroachment of these incredible storms that we're going to see gain in intensity over the years. Increasing frequency and size of harmful algal blooms, polluted runoff contaminating coastal waters resulting in over 20,000 annual beach closings and swimming advisories, mounting problems due to the introduction of invasive species, loss of coral reefs and other underwater habitat, overexploitation of fish stock, and acidification of the global oceans, which is a huge issue in the global climate change. We've both met with Mr. Markey. We hope to appear before that committee on global climate change and make sure that oceans are mentioned in the climate change debate. They have not been mentioned to date by almost anybody. The media never includes the oceans as the first victim and probably houses our hope for the future if we understand how it operates and the processes there. So the government's flaws are many. We have fragmented laws, overlapping jurisdictions, absence of coherent national ocean policy, and this committee has the opportunity with H.R. 21, it's probably the only going bill in either House of Congress that addresses a national ocean policy. Lack of federal support for emerging regional ocean governance, absolutely critical part of an ecosystem-based approach where we have a collaborative effort between the states and the federal government. Absence of a coherent management regime to guide activities in federal offshore waters. We seriously need legislation from the Congress that talks about aquaculture in the deep water, in the federal waters, renewable energy sources such as wind mills, bioprospecting, which is gaining tremendous support from the pharmaceuticals in this country. We need a regime, and it needs to talk about the revenue stream that's got to come back to the states and the federals to carry out the very policies that we're talking about this morning. So what are we putting in jeopardy by allowing the health of our ocean to decline? Much more than people realize, I think. With an offshore ocean jurisdiction larger than the total land mass of the continental United States, U.S. federal waters support important commerce, trade, energy, and mineral resources. the economic contributions the oceans and coasts and their watersheds make are staggering. And I think the chairman this morning talked about the economic aspects of this are not trivial. More than $1 trillion, or 1/10 of the annual GDP, come out of what we call the nearshore areas, which are defined in our report, very carefully defined, because people tend to be very loose about the coast. What makes up the coast? We said there's nearshore, there's the watershed counties, and the ocean itself and the rivers that feed them as well. The contributions swell to over $6.1 trillion, more than half the GDP, when considering all coastal watershed counties, thereby putting tremendous burdens on the coastal water health. Ocean-dependent economic activity, fishing, the chairman reported out very accurately of what it contributes to the economy, almost $120 billion annually. And annually, the nation's ports handle more than $700 billion in goods. The cruise industry accounts for $11 billion in spending, and the retail expenditures on recreational boating exceed $30 billion. Well, the recent progress has been somewhat encouraging. Following release of the two reports, the President issued the U.S. Ocean Action Plan and established the Committee on Ocean Policy in December of 2004. And that committee spawned numerous subcommittees and working groups to lay the foundation for an ecosystem-based approach to the input from the administration. The release of the Ocean Research Priorities Plan and Implementation Strategy in January of this year by the administration represents a watershed moment for the ocean science community, and designation of the Northwest Hawaiian Islands as a national monument is another noteworthy achievement. At the state level, a number of governors demonstrated strong leadership by initiating regional strategies for coordinating ocean and coastal science and policy, including the Great Lakes, Northeast, Gulf of Mexico, West Coast, and individual state strategies in California, Washington, Massachusetts, New York, Florida, New Jersey, Alaska, and Hawaii. We've just returned from a regional ocean conference in Monterey that Leon and I hosted, and we're encouraged by the enthusiasm of the representatives of so many organizations for regional partnerships. We are looking to the states to continue their efforts and hope their work will stimulate a similar level of commitment to change at the national level. Congress also made some progress last year by reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation and Management Act, enactment of the Marine Debris Research, Prevention, and Reduction Act, enactment of the Tsunami Warning and Education Act. At least a dozen additional important ocean bills benefited from considerable attention by various committees, and this provides a reservoir of opportunity for this Congress to make great strides this year, moving towards a new national ocean policy. Conclusion, I'd like to say that while expectations for significant progress towards ocean policy reform have been high, the collective results have been relatively slow in coming. Granted, it has only been 2 years since the release of the Commission's report to Congress and to the administration, and we've been struggling at the national level with other challenging issues, of course, of national importance as well. Yet it is the urgency of the situation surrounding the state of our oceans that have driven Leon and me and our commissioners to establish this initiative. A concern regarding the health of our oceans and coasts cuts across every sector of our society, and as Leon and I have clearly demonstrated, they drive people towards bipartisan cooperation, which is hard to come by these days. Oceans provide an opportunity for this committee to forge a lasting legacy by helping secure passage of legislation that fundamentally reforms ocean governance at the federal level. Modernizing ocean science, management, and education in preparation for the inevitable transition that will accompany a changing climate is a relatively modest initiative, yet it languishes for the lack of few strong champions. You are the champions in this committee now. You have within your grasp the opportunity to enact a handful of laws that will earn you the lasting appreciation of our children, grandchildren, and countless future generations. With that plea for progress, I'll turn now to Leon to outline for you some of the most important steps Congress must take to move forward on implementing a new national ocean policy.
Thank you very much, Admiral Watkins. And now the chair recognizes Mr. Leon Panetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, other members who are attending and who have shown great interest in oceans issues. I'm really honored to be here, honored because you've taken the time to have a hearing on these ocean issues, and honored as a former member of this body to be back here and having a chance to be with a lot of my former colleagues. I'm pleased that Admiral Watkins and I have come together in this Joint Oceans Initiative to try to bring together the work of both commissions. As the Admirals pointed out, we have two commissions that had hearings across the country, and both came to the same findings, that our oceans are in crisis. We are in danger not only of damaging what is obviously one of the greatest natural resources of our planet. After all, 70% of our planet is blue. But we are in danger of impacting on life itself, and I think that's what needs to be brought home to the American people. This is about life itself. It's about our health, it's about our nutrition, it's about our climate, it's about our recreation, it's about our economy, and it's about our very spirit. That's what the oceans are all about. As a boy growing up in Monterey, as Sam knows, Monterey was the sardine capital of the world. They used to catch about 1 billion tons of sardine each year. In the late 40s, the sardines were basically fished out. I can't tell you the economic impact that that had in that community. There were literally thousands of families that were impacted by that. And yet we've seen the same story with cod in the Northeast. We've seen it with shrimp in the Gulf. We're seeing it with tuna. As the National Geographic pointed out just this last week, 90% of the big fish in the ocean are gone. So those fisheries could be lost. It's our obligation, your obligation as elected leaders, our obligation as citizens, and all of us as stewards of this resource, to ensure that that never happens again and that we protect the legacy of our oceans for ourselves and for our children. How do we do that? Obviously, this subcommittee, the committee, this Congress, need to work together to develop a comprehensive approach to ocean policy in terms of reform and funding. The good news is that it's not too late. The bad news is that the clock is still ticking. Let me summarize 6 areas where I think it's important to take action. We did this in a presentation that we made for the Senate last year, From Sea to Shining Sea, but I thought it would be good if, and we do this in our testimony, let me just summarize the 6 areas where I really urge you to take action. Number 1, you have to strengthen national ocean governance. As the Admiral pointed out, we cannot deal with the problems of our oceans if we rely on the present confused, fragmented, and conflicting set of regulations, rules, and laws that deal with our oceans. We've got 140 different laws. If you combine state laws and local laws, what happens is that a federal district court judge ultimately has to decide policy with regards to our oceans, and that's not a good way to manage our oceans. So we urge you to do the following. Adopt a statement of national ocean policy that commits this country to protecting our oceans, that establishes a coordinated and comprehensive program of research and conservation and management and education and monitoring and assessment. This country has made that commitment with regards to clean air. We've made it with regards to clean water. We've made it with regards to our land. We have not done that with regards to our oceans. So I strongly urge that you pass legislation making that national commitment to protecting our oceans. Establish NOAA in law. NOAA was established by an executive order. They need to have the core mission of managing our oceans and trying to promote ecosystem-based management of our oceans and our coastal areas and their resources, and to incorporate the use of good science in that effort. In addition, you need to do oversight of the administration's Committee on Ocean Policy Action Plan. They developed a good action plan. Frankly, you need to do oversight to ensure that it's being implemented. I would make the federal, and we recommend that you make the Federal Coordinating Committee something that exists in law and not just by executive order. And in addition to that, the President ought to appoint an assistant to the President in charge of ocean policy. Secondly, you need to promote and encourage regional ocean governance. We have a lot of regions that are doing good things in this area. We have a lot of states that understand the importance of operating with our oceans on a regional basis. But unfortunately, the federal government doesn't provide the encouragement and support that is necessary in order to ensure that the feds, the state, local government The stakeholders, fishermen, are at the table working on a common plan to protect our oceans. If we can set those kinds of targets and have everybody agree to that, that's the most effective way to deal with planning for our oceans. We need legislative action that will provide a national framework to support these regional approaches, and that will encourage everybody to be at the plan and integrate a management approach that looks at the entire ecosystem of an area and that combines land and sea. Thirdly, we need to expand and improve our ocean science research and education. There's no way we can deal with these issues without expanding the science involved there. We need to incorporate oceans into the President's Innovative and Competitiveness Initiative. We need to establish a national ocean education strategy, and we need to support the administration's effort to develop research priorities with regards to our oceans. We need to establish an integrated ocean observing system so that we get the kind of information that we need in order to protect our oceans. And lastly, we need to expand ocean exploration. I was amazed that a figure that said 1,500 people have climbed Mount Everest, 300 people have gone into space, 12 have actually walked on the moon, but only 2 people have gone to the deepest part of our oceans. 95% of our oceans are virtually unexplored. So we need to expand that effort. Fourthly, we need to include oceans in any legislation that deals with climate change. Oceans are the engine that drives climate change. We have to recognize that the impact of global warming is affecting our oceans. Acidification, it's changing the currents. We have rising sea levels. We have the bleaching of our coral reefs. All of that needs to be dealt with in the context of global warming. Fifth, we need to, and it's not something that you have jurisdiction over, but I want to bring it to your attention, we need to approve the Law of the Seas Treaty. This is a treaty that we established in order to provide some jurisdiction in the world where the world community can sit down and deal with common issues. We are the only industrialized nation that has not ratified that treaty. We are not sitting at the table. When there are jurisdictional issues that come up, and there are a lot of them coming up now with regards to questions regarding our continental shelf, with questions regarding our jurisdiction, scientific research, sea lanes, we are not even at the table because we haven't ratified that treaty. I would urge you to ask your Senate colleagues to ratify that treaty. And lastly, we want you to increase, obviously, funding for core science, core ocean and coastal programs. The last 2 years, we have seen funding go down in the ocean areas. It's a tragedy, particularly at a time when we need to have that kind of information to protect our oceans. We urge you to increase funding to $750 million above the 07 level. You have done a letter to the Budget Committee, and we commend you for that, urging that those funds be approved. We ask that the Appropriations Committee follow through. We also ask that you consider establishing an ocean trust fund to support these ocean programs, and that you direct the administration to develop an integrated ocean budget so that we look at all of the ocean's issues in the budget. Those are some of the issues I would bring to your attention. I want to thank you for this hearing. I want to thank you for your leadership. 100 years ago, Madam Chair, Teddy Roosevelt committed this country to protecting our land so that we would preserve it as a legacy for the future. 100 years later, we need to do the same thing for our oceans. You have that opportunity for the sake of our planet and for our children to accomplish that. Thank you.
I wish to thank former Congressman Panetta and the very distinguished witness, Admiral Watkins, for the very informative discussion here today, and it looks as if we have a very ambitious agenda ahead of us. Thank you very much. And now the chair wishes to recognize Ms. Glackin. She's here to testify on behalf of the administration.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I want to express my gratitude to the members of this committee. Your continued support of NOAA and our programs and missions is vital to this country. We've heard eloquently spoken by my colleagues this morning about the Commission report and the urgency with which we have to address these issues. And in response to the Commission report, the President established a cabinet-level committee on ocean policy that provides a framework to coordinate ocean and coastal-related activities of more than 20 federal agencies that administer more than 140 laws. The committee conducts its operational work through an interagency subcommittee that looks at ocean science, resource management, and integration, and they in turn have subordinate bodies that address management specifically, and then ocean science and technology. NOAA has a unique position within the federal government as being the only agency that has a co-chair of both of these important subcommittees, so we're certainly central to this. As part of his response, the President also released the U.S. Ocean Action Plan, which identifies immediate short-term and longer-term actions that are necessary to more effectively manage coastal and ocean resources. In the 2 years since the plan was released, substantial progress has been made in completing our commitments as documented in the plan. And we have an Ocean Action Plan implementation update that was released in January, and I would like to ask that this report be submitted into the record. Significantly, 83% of the actions in the Ocean Action Plans have been met, and the remaining 17% are on schedule to be completed by their target date. NOAA is the lead or co-lead on 45 of these tasks. I want to highlight for you this morning just a few of NOAA's many notable accomplishments in support of the plan. In June, the President designated the Northwest Hawaiian Islands as a national marine monument encompassing nearly 140,000 square miles. On March 2nd, First Lady Laura Bush announced the new Hawaiian name, Papahana, now Muku'akea, and I did practice that, I have to tell you. For the first time in history, NOAA is playing a leading role in managing a national monument. Improving the coordination and effectiveness of marine fisheries management is also an important part of the Ocean Action Plan. Thanks to the hard work and efforts of this committee and our friends in Congress, the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation and Management Act was reauthorized and is now law. Two primary goals of the Act, ending overfishing and increasing the use of dedicated access and limited access privilege programs, were embodied in the Ocean Action Plan. In my role as co-chair of the Subcommittee on Integrated Management of Ocean Resources and a NOAA employee, one of the things I'm most proud of is our work with our partners to support regional ocean governance, such as the activities with the Gulf of Mexico Alliance. In response to regional priorities articulated by the states of Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, this initiative brought together 13 federal agencies under the leadership of NOAA and EPA. The Alliance formally released the Governor's Action Plan for Healthy and Resilient Coasts in March of 2006. The plan includes key actions across the Alliance's priority areas that will result in healthier beaches and shellfish beds, restoration and conservation of coastal wetlands, and a regional environmental education program. Similar regional initiatives exist elsewhere and are emerging in other areas like the South Atlantic and other coastal regions of the U.S. The Ocean Action Plan also identifies the importance of improving our understanding of ocean coasts and Great Lakes by seeking greater collaboration, coordination, cooperation, and synergies. The plan called for the development of a research priorities and implementation strategy. This was undertaken and recently released in January of 2007. This plan provides strategic directions for future research, and it most importantly articulates priorities among the competing demands. Improved ocean management requires an ocean literate public, as we've heard here this morning, and to this end, NOAA is committed to advancing lifelong ocean education. We are participating with our federal partners on the Interagency Working Group on Ocean Education to identify opportunities and articulate priorities for enhancing ocean education, outreach, and capacity building. Our formal and informal activities include scholarships and fellowship programs, education and research grants, and strategic partnerships with education institutions and industry. While the administration continues to make significant progress in implementing the Ocean Action Plan, Congress has a critical role to play as well. In addition to providing funding and oversight as discussed here today, we're hopeful that Congress will pass several key pieces of legislation. The passage of the NOAA Organic Act would authorize and consolidate into one law NOAA's divergent roles and responsibilities that now reside in more than 200 separate statutes. The act should accomplish the full spectrum of NOAA's mission while providing the agency flexibility in determining how to best structure itself to address current and future needs. The administration will transmit a proposal for such legislation to Congress shortly. We appreciate your interest in the bill and want to work with you to pass this legislation. Another important legislative priority is the passage of the National Offshore Aquaculture Act. This bill, unveiled by Secretary Guterres earlier this month, would provide the Department of Commerce the authority to regulate aquaculture in federal waters. NOAA looks forward to working with this committee to move this legislation forward. Also this session, we hope to see the passage of the National Marine Sanctuaries Amendments Act, which will update, strengthen, and clarify the Sanctuaries Act to allow NOAA to improve its mission in this area. We also want to work with you in reauthorization of the Coral Reef Conservation Act to be able to promote wise management, conservation, and protection of these vital ecosystems. Continued implementation of the President's Action Plan remains a priority for the administration. The FY 2008 budget requests $123 million in increases for NOAA to support the plan. This includes $38 million to protect and restore marine and coastal areas, including $8 million for enforcement and management in the new Northwest Hawaiian Islands Monument. The request, also in this request, is $25 million to ensure sustainable use of ocean resources, including $6.5 million to implement the new and expanded requirements of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. This includes $16 million for the Integrated Ocean Observing System, as mentioned earlier, and support of our new IUs program. The components of this budget request will allow NOAA to further the responsible use and stewardship of ocean and coastal resources. Finally, in closing, I would like to note that in 2007, NOAA is proud to be celebrating 200 years of science, service, and stewardship to our nation. From the establishment of the Survey of the Coast in 1807 by Thomas Jefferson, to the formation of the Weather Bureau and the Commission of Fish and Fisheries in the 1870s, much of America's scientific heritage is rooted in NOAA. We will continue to honor this legacy as we follow the roadmap that the Ocean Action Plan has provided to us to foster more effective management and conservation of our coastal and ocean resources. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this journey, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Glackin. And again, thank you all for your testimony. The ranking member of this subcommittee, Mr. Brown, the gentleman from South Carolina, has just arrived, so I'm asking him if he has any opening statements to make.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I certainly would like to apologize to the presenters for my lack of being here, but I was called away on a very special meeting, and so I apologize for being late. But Madam Chairman, thank you very much for allowing all three members of the panel to make their presentation at one time. I think that will expedite things, particularly since we will have a vote coming up pretty shortly. That instead of, I guess, delivering my opening statement, I would like just to submit it for the record.
Without objection.
And also, Congressman Don Young would like also to submit an opening statement too. So if I could just have unanimous consent to submit it.
Without objection. Thank you very much. And now, consistent with Committee Rule 3C, the chairwoman will now recognize members for any questions they may wish to ask the witnesses, alternating between the majority and the minority and allowing 5 minutes each for each member. Should the members need more time, we do have a second round of questions. However, I think there is a vote coming up, and I do have one question. We'll see how long we can proceed, and then we will recess until members return. My first question is for Mr. Panetta or Admiral Watkins. In response to the recommendations of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy, the administration established by executive order a Committee on Ocean Policy to coordinate the ocean-related activities of various executive branch departments and agencies. You advocate the need to codify this committee and enhance its status and its responsibilities. Yet it sounds like the administration thinks we have all the coordination we need. Do you feel progress has been made in the area of intergovernmental coordination, and what, if any, additional legislation or policy changes are necessary to ensure that the coordination you think is needed is occurring?
Madam Chair, I think the administration has taken an important step in trying to provide some degree of coordination on ocean policy, as both commissions determined. Prior to the establishment of that committee, there literally was nowhere in the administration was there any effort to try to coordinate all of the different policies. And as you know, ocean policies are spread out among a number of departments and agencies. And so this was a very important step to do that, and I commend the administration for taking that step. The reason that we suggest codifying it is because, in my experience, although this was established by executive order, there is no binding responsibility on future presidents to continue this. And so it would seem to me that because of our concern about the oceans and the need to coordinate policies, that the Congress ought to legislate and codify this committee so that it is ongoing and so that it has the proper staffing and support that is necessary for this committee to be able to do the kind of work that we think is important in bringing these policies together. And that's why we support codifying the existence of that committee.
Are there any remarks, Admiral, that you'd like?
Yes, I think one of the key elements of that is that, in my experience as Secretary of Energy, was that we visited the White House on important issues. An advisor to the president is critically important. We've kind of relegated the advisor to the president for science and technology to third string. He's no longer called the advisor to the president for that. We lose something in the science technology coordination through the Office of Management and Budget process. We do the same thing here. It's okay to have this organizational setup, and I've told Mr. Connaughton of CEQ that I give him an A- for planning. But the execution, doing more than we have done in the past, hasn't happened yet. Even with the administration's $134 million that Ms. Glackin talked about here a minute ago, that's a fine initiative. But the total budget is $100 million less than last year's appropriated. We've been at status quo for 3 years. So if there's a committee on ocean policy doing something, it's hard to see it in terms of new initiatives along the lines of our recommendations. So that's another reason why we think it's important to codify, and that they come forward with an integrated ocean budget each year. This can be in guidance from the Office of Management and Budget to the agencies that are funding agencies. They can come up with their individual recommendations, but somebody needs to horizontally integrate those. And that could be done at the White House level with this Committee on Ocean Policy. So the groundwork is laid, but I think to codify it and to give it strength and meaning from president to president right now is extremely important. And I don't think that would go over well with the administration, but nevertheless, we've recommended that as being an absolutely positive step. And I think that in your H.R. 21, you try to do that.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Point well taken. I'd like to call on the ranking member now to ask a question. There is a vote ongoing, but we'll try to keep the committee going if we can stagger our votes, hopefully. Otherwise, we'll take a short recess. But for now, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Madam
Chair. This question would be to the Admiral or Mr. Panetta. Would you consider the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative and advocacy group
I think we are advocates for the reports that both of our commissions came forward with. I mean, the reason we developed the joint initiative effort was because both commissions pretty much came to the same findings and same conclusions, and we felt it was important to bring both commissions together to try to push for their recommendations to be acted on by the Congress.
Okay. And could you tell me how the commission is funded?
The Meridian Institute is the institute that supports the joint initiative effort, and they in turn, I believe, receive some grants as well to help support in that funding. But the Meridian Institute is an institute that's been involved in bringing together opposing parties on a number of environmental issues and bringing them together to try to find consensus. And so we thought it was a good fit to try to bring both of these commissions together on a bipartisan basis to try to advocate.
And so it does qualify for some federal, were those federal grants you were talking about?
I don't believe so. I don't believe we receive any federal grants, no.
So there's no federal funds involved at all? Or is any federal government staff working for the joint committee?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman. You
Thank-
want me to go vote now and then come
Thank-
back? Is it?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. And the chair now recognizes Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I wanted to ask both Admiral and also Congressman Panetta about the global warming issue. You know, I think, Admiral, you said that the sea level rise and the issues of global warming as they affect the oceans and the coast hasn't received enough attention, and I would agree. But I will tell you that in my home state of New Jersey, it's received a lot of attention. I think there's more focus on that aspect than on any other aspect of global warming. But just give me an idea. I mean, what do you think the most serious impacts will be? Is it just sea level rise? And I'm not, you know, I'm not denigrating that, but I mean, give us some indication of what the impacts would be on the oceans, the coast, and marine life.
Well, I think there, Mr. Pallone, there are many things that Leon brought up earlier in his oral testimony that summarized some of these issues. Oceans and human health has not gotten much attention. 1 degree temperature rise off of Bangladesh, for example, is directly correlative with malaria ashore. We've got huge problems that we have come out of the El Nino event that we've learned about worldwide. If we're interested in third world developing nations in our foreign policy, then we ought to be interested in their survival. There's no clean water for 1 billion people in the world. We've got the melting in the Arctic. That is freshening of the water. That changes the thermohaline driving force for the so-called belt that gives us the climate around the world, bringing the cold water down in the ocean, under the Atlantic Ocean, into the Indian Ocean, over into the Southwest Pacific, and back to the Arctic. If you change that pattern, as we have 8,000 and 10,000 years ago, the geologists tell us, you can stop it. Now, it doesn't stop tomorrow. It's not that kind of a thing. But we're talking in decadal terms here. And we've got to worry a lot about what's going on out there. This is why we want the Integrated Ocean Observing System as part of the climate change understanding. We've got to understand the oceans. We're making decisions based on data that could be faulty. Scientists agree that we need to move in that direction. So we have oceans and human health. We have the bleaching of the reefs, which are the nurturing grounds for our fisheries. We have the pollution that we've been talking about. The oceans can no longer be considered to be the cesspool of mankind that are going to be able to recover themselves. Today, we're showing that they can't recover unless we do something about it. So all of these issues are related to climate change, and we don't have the understanding that we need. For example, if I tell you that one of the most important things is to have a virtual common database, bringing disparate data, thousands of different databases together at a place, generating good products for people like you in decision-making roles, this is a very important element of our recommendations. Is that sexy politically? No.
I'll tell you, though, this, because I did want to ask another question, and I have to go vote, but I'll tell you the whole issue of ocean exploration and research, you know, I know both of you have stressed that. It really is important, and it gets a lot of attention, again, I would say in New Jersey. You know, people talk about the need to expand that and more funding for it. So I want you to be optimistic about your impact out there on the public. I mean, particularly young people are very concerned. And I even know my own kids, you know, they talk to me about exploration and research issues. But I got to get in my question about CZMA to the two of you. I noticed that Ms. Glackin did not mention reauthorization of CZMA. I hope that doesn't mean you don't want to do it, but I am concerned that you didn't mention it. But the two others, Leon and the Admiral, did mention reauthorizing the CZMA. What do you think we need to do legislatively to strengthen this law? I'd like to see it reauthorized. It's very important to New Jersey, and I think nationwide, if you wanted to talk about that briefly.
Well, it is very important, and we do urge that, that CZMA be reauthorized. I think one of the ways it could be strengthened is to incorporate the kind of elements that we've advocated in terms of regional approach into the CZMA. For example, ecosystem planning. We were able to get ecosystem planning built into Magnuson-Stevens. We think it ought to be part of some of the reauthorized bills like the Clean Water Bill and other bills to emphasize the relationship between the land and the sea. New Jersey has been very good at developing approaches that recognize that relationship because, you know, as the Chesapeake Bay Plan makes very clear, the streams that flow into the ocean, the streams that flow into the Chesapeake Bay, if we don't deal with those, it can impact on our fisheries. So I would recommend strongly supporting ecosystem planning, supporting and encouraging regional governance that encourages everyone working at the table and developing a plan to deal with the oceans. CZMA, I think, could be very effective at promoting that kind of effort.
And I think another important contribution you could make would be to set up this regulatory regime that we talked about earlier for emerging new uses in federal waters. The states have made it very clear as we went around the country listening to them that they want to be involved in the offshore waters. Even though they're not in control of those federal waters, they're very germane to the coastal management that they're responsible for. So again, I would encourage the upgrading of CZMA, the reauthorization, to include the provisions that set up the regulatory regime for new and emerging uses of the federal waters, such as in bioprospecting, in deep water aquaculture, and make sure that, and to the energy generation, such as the wind farms, and to make sure that those revenue streams are identified the way Congress thinks they should be identified and roll into this trust fund we're talking about to carry out these various provisions. Unless there's some kind of a stable requirement in law by the Congress to set up such a fund, it's not going to happen. We simply have to have such a fund. And therefore, I think that CZMA, which is such a powerful tool, is a very, very important reauthorization opportunity to carry out many of these provisions that we talked about and what Leon emphasized here in the regional council approach and their involvement so that we, at the federal level, can get the feeling of what they want to do out there. And each region is different. Each region has its own priorities. New Jersey has its different priorities than others. They need to be recognized. And so it has to be a flexible system. It can't be rigid. And the governors have made it very clear to us they don't want unfunded mandates. Yeah. They want to be a partner.
Just to clarify,
I apologize that I have to go run for the vote, but I was hoping we could have a second round because I wanted to follow up again. I apologize.
As a former chair of the Budget Committee, I urge you to go vote.
If I could just introduce, just for the record here, to make the statement that the administration is working. We have a partnership activity going on now with Coastal States Organization that is visioning what the future Coastal Zone Management Act should look like. We've had a document out for public comment, and we've been taking in that comments and having a number of workshops. So we are interested in reauthorizing this, but not in a position to promise that legislation in the short term.
Thank you very much. It's one small advantage of being a representative from a territory is we only vote the committee of the whole, so I can keep this going, and I've told the members to get back as quickly as possible after their vote. I have a couple of questions here on funding. The Joint Ocean Commission is very specific in outlining the new funding that you believe is necessary to truly advance the national interest in managing our ocean and our coastal resources. At the same time, the President's proposed budget for NOAA actually cuts the agency budget from 2007 appropriated levels. As you both understand, and I'm speaking to Mr. Watkins and Mr. Panetta, In these tight budgetary times, important trade-offs must be made as Congress decides where funding should be directed. Why do you think funding for the ocean should be made a priority for Congress, and do you feel the budget the President has requested is sufficient to address the needs you have identified?
Madam Chair, obviously,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I guess there is an amendment that I have to vote on. So the
Well, God bless you. You're going to have a role to play.
committee stands recessed for about 10 minutes.